Reviews. I am Adam. It is the week of San Diego Comic-Con, which means it is a light news week. That said, Rolling Stone has some news, so we can have something to talk about, which is awesome. Because we have to wait until we do our Marvel and DC roundup panels, panel roundups. We're going to have nothing to talk about for a little bit. So a little backstory. So you probably know that Elon Musk has made an attempt to buy Twitter, and then he recently tried to back out of his deal with Twitter because of spam accounts, bot accounts, whatever you want to call them, accounts that aren't real. What's it called? Real accounts. They're there to manipulate trends and things like that. Cybersecurity experts claim that between 3 and 5% of accounts that tweet on any given topic are, bot accounts. They exist to manipulate the trend or make the trend go higher or things like that. Between 3 and 5%, which isn't a lot when you take into consideration how many accounts there are, but whatever. And as a result, what's now getting looked into is trends that happened and what percent of accounts were tweeting about that were bot accounts. So one of the things that was looked into was release the Snyder Cut. And that has opened quite the can of worms. So, number one, out of the gate, it turned out that about 13% of accounts that tweeted about release the Snyder Cut, hashtag release the Snyder Cut, were bot accounts. And that goes the same for accounts that voted for best fan movie at the Academy Awards to go to Army of the Dead, and best stand-up and cheer moment being the Flash using the Speed Force to do things, and the definition of a participation trophy at the Academy Awards. It'd be like it wasn't eligible for an Academy Award. I want to make sure that we're abundantly clear on that. What's it called? The Snyder Cut, because it went to streaming, was not Academy Award eligible, which is why the Snyder Cut could not have won Best Fan Film. But with when they did the other one, the other thing, which doesn't have any basis in anything, and they did movies that were older, and they did movies that, were not quite the same, it came out in the same year, the vote went, then they'll fucking put the Snyder Cut in there too, that way they can have their thing. Now, after winning both of those, it also came out that a large number of bot accounts voted for those. Specifically, after reporting from The Hollywood Reporter and Deadline came out that Cinderella was currently the analyzed frontrunner for Best Fan Film, there was suddenly a massive influx of accounts that voted for Army of the Dead. And at any given point, there are about 200,000 people voting. Like, they're averaging about 200,000 votes a day, if I remember correctly. And then after that, they started pulling substantially more. And Army of the Dead alone was pulling in over 1 million votes a day. Which is just unheard of. Now, looking at all of this and how all of this kind of factors together is the newest reporting that came out about what happened with the Snyder Cut behind the scenes at Warner Brothers. Now, according to the Rolling Stones reporting, Now, I'm not going to say Snyder knew about the, what's it called? I'm not going to say Snyder knew about the, what's it called? The large number of bot accounts. I'm not going to say that, because there's no evidence to suggest that he knew about the large number of bot accounts that were going into, that were going into manipulating the trend and making the trend a topic, making it get the notoriety it did. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest he knew about that. And how would anyone have known at the time that it was being manipulated by more than 1 in 10 accounts tweeting about it were bot accounts? There was no way to know that at the time. That said, if you look at what his actions were, he knew the pull that the Snyder Cut would have. Now, for backstory, they also say that in early 2017, or I believe it was 2017, yeah, that it was the year that Justice League, it was the year that Justice League came out. In early 2017, he delivered a 2-hour and 11-minute cut of the movie to Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers looked at the cut and was like, oh my god, this is awful, this is joyless, it's not a good movie, it's not going to work. Okay. So at that point, they had brought on Joss Whedon to finish the movie, to reshoot and finish the movie. Now, this raises a host of questions for me, especially considering what Ray Fisher has been alleging about Joss Whedon. Because here's my question. And look, I'm not defending Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon is 100% definitely a prick. Like, I think that is fairly easy to glean from this information that is publicly available. That said, I don't think that it is possible that the Snyder Cut could have been the Snyder's theatrical cut, which is now what I'm curious about. Like, we can sit here and be like, oh, well, there was a 40-minute cut of the movie, like a 4-hour cut of the movie, and that would solve the problem. And it's like, alright, great, so he had a 4-hour work print of the movie, great, awesome, but that doesn't translate to a good theatrical movie. I want to know how good was the theatrical, I want to see his theatrical cut, because that is the ultimate question about the Snyder Cut. Does Zack Snyder's original theatrical cut, is it better than Whedon's theatrical cut that we saw in theaters? Because you can sit here and be like, oh, well, we put out a 4-hour version of it, and it's like, yeah, that's very different, though. A 4-hour version of the movie is very different from a 2-hour version. We have a lot more time. And the question I have is, if you're doing a 2-hour version of that movie, Darkseid's not in it. There's no way that you can fit this movie into 2 hours and have Darkseid in it. There's no way you can do this movie in 2 hours and have all the Cyborg stuff that was shot, that was developed with Zack Snyder. There's no way you can have all of that in it either. That's not... It doesn't mesh with that. And a lot of it is backstory that, as we saw in Joss Whedon's, again, not defending Joss Whedon, but as we saw in Joss Whedon's, all it does in the Snyder Cut is add a little bit of extra context, but the issues with Joss Whedon's is not, I don't understand the mother boxes, or I don't understand what Cyborg's role in the mother boxes is. It's not that. I think the blame should really go to Snyder for managing to create a movie that has this character in such a large role in the in the theatrical. What the fuck? That has such a large role in the extended cut. That's double the length. that all of this backstory apparently is integral, but you've managed to cut it all out without losing anything. Nothing is lost in... what's it called? Nothing is lost in the Snyder Cut by... I want to know what asshole thought it was a good idea to do both the service road and the main highway at the same time. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you that you thought this was a good idea? Anyway, looking at, what was going on there, it just doesn't make sense to me as to how that would mesh together. Now, and then if we look at what else happened behind the scenes with Snyder strong-arming his way into getting this, his way, according to the reporting by the Rolling Stone, he knew the strength of his audience. He knew that the Snyder Cut audience would do an attack who he wanted when he wanted. And if he went out and said, hey, look, I want to make the Snyder Cut. I have everything I need to make it. I just need the money to do it and the platform to release it on. And Ann Sarnoff and Walter Hamada won't release it, which is what he threatened to do if they wouldn't give him the money. He knew that would have power. And he knew that would have a substantial amount of sway over DC fans. Also, the article alleges that he was told about what the audience was doing to Godzilla vs. Kong and review bombing Godzilla vs. Kong in an effort to get more people to watch the Snyder Cut, which ultimately failed because the Snyder Cut only pulled 2.2 million viewers, which again is only 300,000 more people than watched the premiere of The Flash on the CW. So that was a good use of $100 million. But wait, no, you didn't get the advertising revenue from that, so or the sweet Netflix deal. So it actually cost you money. So congratulations, good job, all that cool stuff. But looking at it that way, it's like they are going, like, it does not paint a great picture of Snyder's actions in this whole situation. And I think what we're looking at here is that, jokingly, the Snyder Cut, before it was confirmed to have been announced, to have been released, was referred to as Nerd QAnon. And we're seeing some very striking parallels between, whatever. It's a dumb analogy. I'm not going to do it. Even though it's easy, but it's dumb. I just think it's worth noting that we have someone here who knew the power of his words. He knew that he could have, done things differently, and he used it to his own gain. And then there's also, accounts that were tweeting out very negative things about Warner Brothers and his studio heads and things like that, including an account that was tweeting out pictures of Walter Hamada and Ann Sarnoff decapitated, which is normal behavior from a normal fan base that should definitely be capitulated to. There's just so many little things like that happen with the Snyder Cut that it's like, well, alright, you got your movie. It's marginally better than the theatrical. But whatever. But that's the question I have now, and I think I've been saying this since I did my initial review of the Snyder Cut back last March. When I said, look, the Snyder Cut is great, and it's great that they're letting him finish his movie. The problem is, a 4-hour cut of a movie was never going to be released in theaters. We were never going to get a 4-hour Justice League movie. That was just not going to happen. Because the exhibitors would not show a 4-hour Justice League movie. And the problem is, when he brings in a script that is for a 4-hour movie, the executives have to be more hands-on with, so what's getting cut out of this? What is being removed from this off the top? And it's like, okay, well, this, and this. And then it's like, okay, well, go cut that now. I don't need this 4-hour monstrosity of a movie. And then the thing is, too, there is a way to have released this as two 2-hour movies. That's the big problem I have with this, where it's like the idea of that this had to be released as one giant 4-hour movie or a botched to hell 2-hour theatrical cut is just insanity. Like, on what? Why was that a thing? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It just really doesn't. Like, why was it that those are the only two options on the table? Why was it that it had to be either a, what's it called? Either this great thing or this awful thing? And there was a third option, which was just release it as a 2-part movie. Release it as Justice League Part 1, which would be the story of everything leading up to what happened in Gotham Harbor, which is about 2.5 hours into the movie. And then you do Part 2, which is the last hour and a half, which is just everything after Gotham Harbor. And if you really want to even it out, you move Darkseid into Part 2, and there you go. That would solve the problem. Like, it's things like that are like, oh, well, there is a solution to this. I just didn't want to see the solution to this for whatever reason. But things like that are just not. It's just not reflective well in the studio at any point. And then for them to capitulate to Snyder, knowing Snyder is like, well, I'm going to do this, and then like, all right, well, here's $100 million to do that. And on top of it, there's also the fact that this article alleges that Snyder was doing what people have been alleging Disney was doing with the prequels in the lead up to The Force Awakens, which was, and here's the thing about Star Wars. I don't think there has been a paper trail about this conspiracy theory. I think this is just an offshoot of Max Landis, who came out and said that Disney pays for reviews. And I think this is just an offshoot of that, where it was said with no evidence and no anything like that. But the allegation was Disney was paying news organizations to do puff pieces about the prequel trilogy to make the prequels look better. And it could also have just been that, you know, this idea that the prequels look better is because at the time that it was happening, people who were kids when the prequels came out and grew up with the prequels were starting to get into positions at online news sources and on blogs and stuff that were like, well, you know, I really like this movie. Here's why I like this movie. It could have been things like that, which I think is far more likely, if we're being honest, than, what's it called? Than, oh, well, they're openly just doing this to get new reviews, like, to get new eyes on the movies. And it's like, it's not going to make people like the movie any more or less. But the allegation is, in this thing, is that Snyder paid out of pocket for a online marketing consulting company. And this marketing consulting company that he hired was writing reviews about how Batman v Superman was smarter than people gave it credit for, about how the movie was deeper than people gave it credit for, about how it was better than Marvel movies because it did X, Y, and Z. Now, here's the thing. Batman v Superman, not a good movie. Not at all. But, I mean, okay, let me rephrase that. I saw Batman v Superman and I liked it. It could have just been that I saw the movie and I was expecting worse because it had like a 20 on Rotten Tomatoes. And, you know, I walked out of being like, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I didn't anticipate that it would be great, but I didn't anticipate it would be... I was anticipating, like, The Room level bad, or, like, Fantastic Four level bad, but it wasn't that. the fact that it wasn't that was kind of like, oh, well, what was this? What was bad about this? But like, I see this whole thing happening, and I'm like, oh, well, whatever. It's not awful. Like, whatever. And it's one of those things, like, as you watch it, it's like, alright, it's cool, but, you know, it drags. I don't need to see as much of any of it as we do in the movie. I don't know. But if we're going to look at it through that lens, I think that, you know, it's not a movie that was particularly well liked by fans. That's at the end of the day, that's the big deal here. It was not particularly liked by fans. And because it wasn't particularly liked by fans, there was this, you know, this idea that if we could pay people to be like, no, this movie's better, then people might like it more. And what ended up happening was you ended up with this cult of personality that ended up developing out of this. And because of that, they gave Snyder one last... And every problem that DC currently has stems back to this marketing decision. This decision by Zack to hire this outside firm to kind of manipulate how people feel about Batman v Superman so we could do Justice League. And it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, so that's why this happened the way it did. Where it's like, okay, so I created the cult of personality that allowed him to cast Justice League the way he did. And it's like, look, I'll give him credit. Gal Gadot, great choice. But I think it would have been easier to cut ties completely with some of the less popular members of the Justice League, namely Ezra Miller, before The Flash even started shooting 10 years ago. It would have been easier had it not been for Zack Snyder creating this kind of tornado of fandom that took advantage, that used social media. And look, to their credit, they used social media for what social media was designed for, to get attention for that thing. But everything comes back to Zack hiring that marketing firm to make people think Batman v Superman was better than it was. And to form that thing where it's like, oh no, this is his vision. He's doing the movie the way he wants. That's what DC does. They make movies the way that the way that the directors want it to be. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. Goes, look, Marvel does that now too, and people hate that shit. Like, fuck. Like, people did not like Eternals, people did not like Love and Thunder, people did not like that other one, Multiverse of Madness. Like, people want, you know, and people did not like Shang-Chi, people did not like Black Widow. It is one of those, it's, you know, it's just a buzzword at this point. It's auteur theory. But I think we covered enough for today. We'll wrap up there for today. Like I said, San Diego Comic-Con is this weekend. We will be covering all the cool news out of San Diego Comic-Con as it happens. And until then,